Hello, everybody. Uh, holy, holy cannoli Batman. Wow. Where do I begin? Um, the yogurt shop murders have been officially solved. Officially. They caught the guy. The guy, which is interesting because for 30 years, people thought it was either 4 guys, 2 of which spent time in prison, 1 of which has passed away, 4 of which were accused, names completely soiled on the back of a false confession, the families suffering for 30 years, okay? Thinking possibly that it was 2 people. Even we discussed, and I was enraged at the thought that they could have possibly overlooked a specific serial killer, Kenneth McDuff. The leading cause of problems for Austin Police Department for 2 decades at least was a horrific officer. I believe his name was Polanco, right? He not only coerced false confessions out of those boys, which I often call our West Memphis 3, our San Antonio 4, but he coerced false confessions from multiple people in his career. He got a slap on the wrist. He put a gun to one of the kids' head in the interrogation room. Okay, that is coercing a false confession. Okay, that's bad. And after all this time, after everybody's theories, even my own, I mean, my theory was it had to be someone else. Could have been Kenneth McDuff. After all of that, it ends up being a serial killer named Robert Eugene Brashers. Robert Eugene Brashers, the serial killer, was responsible for the yogurt shop murders here in Austin, Texas. 3 decades ago. More than 3 decades ago. Here's why I freaked out and immediately got goosebumps. Because how? This man killed in other states. I believe it was Missouri. We'll go over his stuff. Okay. Where did I first hear his name? I'll tell you exactly where. CeCe Moore. If you don't know who CeCe Moore is, she's pretty much the founder of IgG, of genetic genealogy. Now, a lot of people think, well, certainly not. That was used before, right? Her and Parabon are the ones who began to use GEDmatch for the first time to cross-reference criminal cases to find the answers to cold cases across this country. She pioneered that method. She alone trained others to do this. And we now have the answers to so many hundreds, if not thousands, of cold cases because of her across the country. Remember April Tinsley? Remember that case? CeCe Moore solved it. Remember the serial killer whose genetic genealogy was done off of a pizza crust? I believe it was in Oregon. That's because of her. Also Rex, her. IgG would not be here if it weren't for her. The thing about Brashers is, in 2018, CeCe Moore did IgG on two cases, but one case in particular with 2 victims, Sherry and Megan Scherer. Okay. It was a mother-daughter. We're going to talk about them in a minute. But that case really stuck with me because it was all over the documentaries. I mean, you turn on ID Network, you're going to see the Scherer case, okay? You put on A&E, you're going to see the Scherer case. I believe there was even like a Forensic Files, a Dateline, like it is a very well-known case. And it was horrific. There might have even been a first 48 on it. It was horrific. Why I remembered Robert Eugene is because he reminded me of Larry Eugene Bell. Lots of Eugene middle names in serial killers. You'll notice that. I don't know what that's about. But the thing that made me remember him is his SWAT standoff. I should say police standoff. There were a couple of videos of him. And while this just happened and I don't have all of them, I pulled up some that happened to be on my serial killers list of videos. It's so weird that they were. And in no way did I ever think he was responsible for the yogurt shop murders. Why? Because no one had any clue he'd ever been in Texas. Even on serial killer timelines, no one knew he'd ever been in Texas. There's records for him in, I want to say, Florida, Oklahoma, Arkansas. I believe some in, definitely Missouri, North Carolina, South Carolina, some minor speeding, some other things. But there are other records like Tennessee for a rape in the early 90s. And he went on to kill the Scherers right after. I've looked at him for some cases of young girls in the early 90s in Tennessee. Never once did I think in any way he could be connected to the yogurt shop murders. There were simply no traces available to insinuate that he could have been in Austin at that time. So this would be like, it's the equivalent of finding out that Rex or Israel Keys or someone was involved. It's just like, what? Like, what? It's unbelievable that four guys, their lives were ruined over this when they were kids. Four girls' families, their lives were ruined when those guys got out because they thought their kids' killers got away. Let me show you a picture of the girls while we're here. For those of you who don't know about the yogurt shop murders, we've talked about it quite a bit on this channel. We then veered into Kenneth McDuff, which was going to loop us back around to the yogurt shop murders. That was actually going to be Monday because we've been covering Celeste Rivas. And what's fucking blowing my mind, pardon my French, is by Thursday or Friday, we were going to start going through serial killer timelines to establish who was active in the 90s to look out for. Was he on the list? Sure, but they all were. So that's not me being smart. That's just, let's go through all of them that were active in the 90s. Never once did I think this guy could be the guy. I'm also wondering about the Springfield 3. Now, he killed himself in a standoff with police in 99. Here's what's crazy. A bullet casing in the drain at the yogurt shop. Some of you Richard Allen people are going to be pissed about this. Okay? Because in this one, there's actually torture and a coerced confession, gun to the guy's head. But also, the casing, right, matched the bullet in the gun that Brashers used to kill himself in the SWAT standoff in 1999. So what is that, 8 years later? He kills himself with the very weapon that would match the bullet casing from the crime scene that was in a drain. Simultaneously, IgG DNA analysis linked back to him. Why just now? Well, I would imagine it's because the new cold case detective mentioned he'd like to do IGG. For a while, it wasn't possible because of some pesky laws. And one of the few things that our politicians did well was say, okay, we'll fight the FBI on that. We'll force them to show us what databases have the girl's info put in on that and see if it links up. Even though they told us that these are randomized and they can't give us any info. And they ran the ass of the FBI. They were up there. They're like, no, we need to figure it out. Well, in the end, they actually didn't have any info on this University of Florida archive with this stranger's IgG in it. So or DNA, what did they do? They said, fuck it. We're going to go around. We're going to make legislation to allow Texas to use the CC Moore method. And that was years ago. And then a new detective comes along, and in the Yogurt Shop documentary, we see two things that I think are important before we start reading all the info. I'm going to read a bunch of shit to you. Everything that I could find. But what's fascinating to me, let me get a sip. I'm holy hell. What is fascinating to me is that in that documentary, The Yogurt Shop Murders, which just came out on HBO, I want to point out Detective Jones. Detective Jones pulled out a yellow shirt. We saw him rocking back and forth in the documentary, having PTSD from the things he saw. When he had to describe the body of Amy Ayers, how it was positioned, that she was possibly still alive, burning, crawling away when she was shot in the back of the head. The sexual assaults, the fact that there was potential DNA from a male who was not any of the boys. The fact that he had no idea what Polanco did when he was in that room, screaming at those kids, getting those false confessions. And that he wore that yellow shirt the night he happened to be. This is what's also, it's always blown my mind. He's got a documentary film crew doing a ride along with him that night. Hadn't been done before to him. Really, to the department in a long time. Like cops, even they went to San Antonio. So, and I'm sorry if I sneeze. I do have allergies. I've been trying not to. So he wears this yellow shirt that night. And this film crew's in his car as he gets the call for the worst homicide he's ever been on. Right after he's talking about how there's just like, yeah, there's some robberies usually. We don't see a lot of murders and stuff. Beep, beep, beep. Oh, you better go. So he goes and he responds. He's wearing this yellow shirt. He gets there. He gets in a fight with the medical examiner. Like an actual fight. Like they're screaming at each other. He talks about this in the documentary. Because the medical examiner is not listening to him. They want to take the bodies right away. He says, preserve them, wait. We need to get DNA. We need to get swabs. We need to get pictures. Let's just wait for the FBI to get here. Let's just wait and swab them first. We can't risk contamination. Everything's already wet and on fire. And the medical examiner got pissed and was saying, you know what, fuck it. If they're not here in 3 minutes, I'm taking these bodies. And he said, don't you dare. You're not touching them. If it weren't for Jones preserving that evidence, we wouldn't have answers today. I truly think that. If it weren't for CC Moore and all the work she's done in IgG analysis, we wouldn't have answers today. And in the documentary, he shows that yellow shirt that he wore that night. And he says, I promised myself that the day we finally get the true answers is the day I wear the shirt again. And I hope to God that he is wearing that shirt. This is wild. So I'm going to show you how I found out, and it's 25 seconds long, so I don't think I'll get copyright struck. And then we're going to talk about Robert and what a dickhead he is and all the dickheaded things he did. Not just to the girls, but to others and to the sharers, and how this all came to be.
Some huge breaking news for Austin tonight. 48 Hours correspondent Erin Moriarty has learned a suspect has been identified in the 1991 yogurt shop murders. This is big. It rocked Austin in 1991. She says it's according to one of the original investigators who worked on the case.
Also, can we talk about what a news-friendly voice he has? And I do want to shout out, dude, Erin Moriarty. You know, maybe I should give her as much credit as Lester Holt, because she knows what's up. She developed a really close friendship with Detective Jones, who really worked his ass off for this case, advocated like hell. He literally lost his family, his marriage, and sleep at night. And I got to tell you, him and Erin, dude, you know, I can't think of a better journalist to break it. I really can't.
She says it's according to one of the original investigators who worked on the case where 4 teenage girls died. Retired Austin Detective John Jones told CBS News the suspect is Robert Eugene Brashers, who is dead. We'll have more soon.
Okay. So Brashers, we are going to talk about him in a moment. I'm going to show you a little bit about him. Let me just give you one moment. And let me pop over here and tell you how this all came to be. Because this is, whoa. Oh my God. You guys hear this? This is I need to take this off. This is a wiki for now thing that popped up that I accidentally slipped in there. And it said, Ceci Moore is a genealogist. Like when AA tries to speak, it is pathetic. Okay. And I'm hoping that this stuff doesn't freeze like hell on me. I can't believe this. This feels like when Joseph James D'Angelo got identified. This, for Austin anyway, I think it's safe to say today feels like if the West Memphis 3 finally got, I mean, they're never going to get their innocence back, but finally got exonerated in society. Like nobody can say shit to them, which I still don't think anybody can, because it wasn't fucking them. But to know who actually did the West Memphis 3, wouldn't that be wonderful? It's like finding out who killed John Monet. It's like fucking finally. Finally. And for us, it's like, it's not just justice for the girls, but it's justice for the boys, and it's actual answers for the family, without a doubt. On December 6, 1991, a fire broke out at the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt business. When firefighters arrived, 4 bodies were found: Sarah's sister and Jennifer Harbison, and their friends Amy Ayers and Eliza Thomas. The families of these girls have been fighting for answers ever since. In 1999, Austin police charged 4 men with the crime. 2 of their convictions were overturned because of a mistake by prosecutors and investigators. 2 men were never tried. Now, I would argue that saying a mistake, it's a bit minimizing. What we now know, well, let's go through this. The suspect in the 1991 I Can't Believe It's Yogurt murders has been identified officially by Austin police through DNA testing, specifically IgG. The suspect was identified as Robert Eugene Brashers. APD is going to give us more details on September 29th, which is 3 days away, and I can't wait. Austin, Texas. The suspect in connection to 1991's I Can't Believe It's Yogurt murder case has been identified. Jennifer Harbison, Sarah Harbison, Eliza Thomas, and Amy Ayers were all killed 34 years ago. What do we know? Austin police said that the suspect was Robert Eugene Brashers. Police said he committed suicide in 1999. We'll talk more about that in a minute. APD said they will host the news conference on September 29th. Our team never gave up working on the case, APD said in a statement. For almost 34 years, they've worked tirelessly and remained committed to solving this case for the families of Jennifer Harbison, Sarah Harbison, Eliza Thomas, and Amy Ayers, all innocent lives taken senselessly and far too soon. So, one thing I want to talk about, when the documentary came out and for years before, one of the investigators who focused on DNA worked with Polanco, the guy who put the gun to the kid's head and coerced the false confession. One of these investigators is in a local group that I'm in, and so are two other more recent investigators who have since retired. The original one, Jones, is not in that group. But this one, I'm not going to name his name. I'm not going to shit on him. He has been hell-bent on the boys did it. The boys did it. The boys did it. Maurice Pierce. You probably saw him in the documentary. He tried to explain YSTR, and he did it very poorly in the group. Okay. He seemingly, in my opinion, refused to admit that it even could be a serial killer. He was so sure it was someone super local who went to the school because it was personal. Now, we now know sick fuckers do sick things, and it isn't always personal. Some people are just crazy and assholes. So, this fella, okay, maintained for quite some time even that Polanco was justified or did a good job. And then he changed his tune and didn't acknowledge it anymore. The guy Polanco, of course, doesn't want to admit that he fucked up on multiple cases, so much so that other people were exonerated outright. People sued the city, sued him. He literally got in a lot of trouble for it, but not enough. He should be in fucking prison. I believe he did go to jail, though, for a little while. He fucked up a major serial killer. Remember Raul Mesa? Okay, we'll get into that later. There are connections to a lot of ex-APD who did piss poor jobs and allowed bad tactics, bad policing, bad detective work to overshadow the truth. Jones, the original detective on this case, is not one of those cops. He's a good fucking dude. If anything, it tears my fucking heart out to see I would consider him like a duty Ed Duty Ron level. Like, he's a badass, okay? He's a badass and a good dude. And he tried his best. And he caught a lot of hell. And I think that another reason he caught a lot of hell was because he was one of the few people that, I'm just going to say it right now, I think he was dead ass right the whole time. Because what did he always say? It could be someone we haven't even thought of yet. Could be someone we've never interviewed. He was very open to the possibilities. He did not seemingly have tunnel vision, in my opinion. This is a great day for him. So let me tell you a little bit about how this came to be, okay? And we're going to go straight to Queen Bey, Erin Moriarty, for the breaking news, because she put out an article with CBSnews.com in 48 hours. The correspondent Erin Moriarty has learned a suspect has been identified in the 1991 murders of 4 teenage girls in Austin, Texas at the yogurt shop. This is according to one of the original investigators who worked on the case. We all know it's Jones. That suspect is Robert Eugene Brashers. He's deceased, says Jones. Brashers is a serial killer and rapist who committed at least 3 murders between 1990 and 1998 in the states of South Carolina and Missouri. He died in January of 1999 by suicide during a standoff with the police. The gun he used to shoot himself, we already talked about this, is believed to be consistent with the bullet casing found in the drain inside of the yogurt shop, says Jones. The connection between Brashers and the case was made through DNA, though, Jones told Moriarty. Moriarty has been reporting on this case since the beginning. On December 6, 1991, 17-year-old Eliza Thomas, 13-year-old Amy Ayers, and the two sisters, 17-year-old Jennifer Harbison and 15-year-old Sarah Harbison, were found gagged, tied up with their own clothing, and shot in the head in an I Can't Believe It's yogurt shop in Austin. Themselves and the crime scene and the shop were all set on fire, compromising much of the evidence. There were also sex assaults and potential posing of the ice cream scoop in between the legs of the youngest, which is highly disturbing. Eliza and Jennifer had been working at the yogurt shop that night. They were getting ready to close when Jennifer's sister Sarah and her friend Amy met them there to head home. Following the crime, the Austin Police Department developed a task force dedicated solely to solving the case. Government agencies, including the FBI, were called in to assist, but the case ultimately went cold until 1999 when four men, Robert Springsteen, Michael Scott, not The Office, Maurice Pierce, and Forrest Wellborn, were arrested and charged with the murders. The men were only teenagers at the time of the crime, though. They were first questioned just days after the murders when one of them, Maurice Pierce, was arrested at a mall not far from the yogurt shop with a .22 caliber gun. One of the same types of weapons believed to have been used in the killing. Why do I say that? Because there were two. There was a .22 and I believe it was a .38 380. It was either 380 or 38, I don't remember. All four were released back then for lack of evidence. But in 1999, when a new team of investigators were tasked with taking a fresh look at the case, they obtained confessions from two of the four men, Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott. Those confessions would later be called into question after the two recanted, saying they were coerced. I would say so. Again, gun to the head. Not a good way to do that. All right. Charges were ultimately dropped against Maurice Pierce and Forrest Wellborn due to their lack of evidence, and Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott were the only two to go on trial. The sole evidence against them were their own words, and that is absolutely true. There was absolutely no DNA evidence. They did not own guns that were at the crime scene. Like, literally, a made-up story came to them in the form of some tips, insinuating that all the boys that were down at the creek had a community weapon, a gun they hid under the bridge. Two of the Creek boys who would later be interviewed, one of them called Mace, was also snitched on, and that guy simply because he lived next to there and hung out at the creek. And in the documentary, even he and his other buddy are like, or his buddy lived down at the creek. They're like, this is ridiculous. I would never just have a gun down there. Like, are you crazy? The sole evidence against them were their own words. They were both convicted, but a few years later, their convictions were overturned on constitutional grounds. Why? Because our drunk district attorney, Rosemary Lindbergh, finally did some fucking DNA testing, got the results back, didn't match any of them. Okay. One of the DNA tests, I believe, was from a sexual assault kit. All right. There were two male DNAs found on one girl, and one of them was a stranger and the other was her boyfriend. Okay. Now, she had seen her boyfriend before work, so that made sense. But the other DNA of a sexual nature, because they were assaulted, was from an unknown male source. It was YSTR, I believe, is what they had to do. So the youngest also had an unknown male DNA on them, and I believe one of the other girls. So essentially, some fucking nasty, perverted psychopath did something to them. And for many years, these boys got blamed because a week later, at the mall across, remember when we did the drive around? The place we went right after, the parking lot right across with the Walmart? Because that guy was in that old mall, okay? had a gun. So everyone said he must have done it. They then stole a car, drove to San Antonio, and remembered that they had actually read about the yogurt shop murders in the paper. They were very upfront about that, and the investigators latched on. And I agree with you, Sunflower Soul. This was never a robbery gone wrong or something teenage wily. Absolutely. You don't show up with the intent to rob a place and then it goes wrong and somehow you pile up bodies, tie them up, sexually assault them, and burn them. That's not how it works. If anything, most criminals would shoot and run. That's it. So this was a disturbed mind and someone who, in my opinion, was comfortable enough to do something so brazen, which is why I've always felt it had to be a serial killer. I really, truly, that's one thing that I will say I've been consistent on. I think it's a serial killer. Why? The ligatures, the positioning of the ice cream scoop, the arson, the fact that the girls were young. Was it a crime of opportunity? Sure. But why do I think it's a serial killer? Because someone who goes that far overboard with that opportunity has likely done some shit like this before. Oddly, I think there was intent in it as well. In that, I truly think had there been any other opportunity, a little more convenient, this person might have taken that. And to me, it's almost selective, but it's also opportunistic. It's a strange combo, but that's something that I think a lot of serial killers use when they're picking out a victim. Who's the most vulnerable? Is there an opportunity? But the intent that you are going to do something horrible to them is there. We've seen that in what we've talked about with Kenneth. Yeah, both Megan and Amy were both, 12 and 13. The young lady in Tennessee, like, this guy is a perv. But he didn't discriminate because he will also kill an adult. He also seemingly had no problem running from the cops and doing wild as hell shit. We're going to look at him in a minute. Charges were, and this is where it gets real fucking sad, by the way. Charges were ultimately dropped against Maurice Pierce and Forrest Wilborn due to lack of evidence, and Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott were the only two to go on trial. The sole evidence against them were their own words. They were both convicted. One of them, death penalty. Death row was the plan for him, but a few years later, the convictions were overturned on the constitutional grounds. The Sixth Amendment gives defendants the right to confront accusers. And in Scott and Springsteen's trials, their confessions were used against one another, but they weren't allowed to question each other in court. Why is that important? Because they had accused each other. It was literally one of them saying, I guess he did it. And then the other saying, I didn't fucking do that. He must have done it because he said I did it. You see how that works? It's fucked up. Now, that's why it was overturned. But what's even more important is they did get DNA back. Rosemary Lindbergh, Travis County District Attorney at the time, worst person, God, was intent on retrying Springsteen and Scott. See what I mean? She knows the DNA is not there, but she's still doing that. She's still going, I will retry him. And I know she wanted to because she said it on the day she announced that the DNA didn't match. Imagine that. Imagine you are releasing someone from a decade of prison and being on death row. And in your announcement that you just got DNA back and it is an unknown male. This is when they found out that it's an unknown male DNA and it doesn't match these guys. Imagine you wrap that up. You always be closing with, but don't worry, we'll try to get them again. We're going to go after the same fellas who had a coerced confession with a gun to one of their head, who had really no motive, no means. Let's be real. Like, They didn't have the other gun. There was just nothing. There was no evidence against these boys other than words. None whatsoever. No prior acts in any way like that. No attempted sex assaults, no rapes, no robberies. I mean, yeah, they stole a car to joyride it. It's still a crime, but it's not like that is not what this is at all. At all. And despite that, and knowing that none of their DNA fit the crime scene, Rosemary said, "Don't worry, we'll try them again." And she led those families the fuck on. And it gets worse. Because Maurice in 2010 is running from the cops. If you saw the documentary, you might recall this part. Some of the kids, because they were kids when this happened, they get accused 10 years after. Okay. Then they go to prison. All right. 2 of them. The 2 got out. Maurice Pierce, he's the one who started the whole, like, I heard that this person did it and this person did it. So he started the involvement. Let's involve us. So he got them all involved in it. And then he gets off because he has a lawyer. He refuses to talk. And he's not giving them the confession they want. Even though they tried and tried and tried and tried. So because he refused to confess, he gets off. But in the documentary, they talk about this. And they've always talked about this. If those boys stayed in Texas, which I fully agree because it happened, they were going to end up dead. Once exonerated, the 2 that were, and then I shouldn't say exonerated, they weren't, they were going to get retried, but the 2 that were released, case overturned, right? And the 2 who were still considered suspects for a decade, but were released because of lack of evidence and didn't have to spend a decade in jail. The lawyers also, everyone in Austin agreed, if they stick around, they're going to get harassed by cops. Whether it's a speeding ticket, whether it's something like, you know, they would have taken an open carry thing too far and told them they were brandishing. Like literally whatever they could. Loitering. It's the little shit, right? It's harassing someone over and over because you know they did it. And that's how police were. And with Hector, with that asshat, out here slinging false confessions and a very corrupt agency at the time that allowed a lot of shit. Listen, if Lewis Walls, Roxanne Paltov, cold case, Roxanne Paltov's, if her boyfriend, who, by the way, that was very Celeste David, but imagine the guy's in his 40s and the girl just turned 18, but they're together since she was 16, and he lied about his age and he looked very young. Okay? Imagine if it was flipped, but the predator was lying about his age to be with the girl. That guy has over 45 cases for violent shit. He has openly admitted while strangling another woman that he killed Roxanne. He admitted to his daughter in a fight that he killed Roxanne, and the daughter tried to extort Roxanne's sister for information. He's been in trouble for pimping, trafficking, beating the shit out of women, aggravated assault on strangers, prostitution, crack, meth, coke, heroin, like every fucking thing you can imagine. Not once have they been able to get him sat down to give a statement. Why'd you have Roxanne's whole, like, they didn't even check the fucking crime scene. They didn't even go into they didn't even consider a missing person at first. They thought Darren Dion Van couldn't have done any of it because he was in prison at the time. Guess what? He wasn't. And he lived right by there. Okay? And not just that, a deaf guy who sex traffics women and was trolling Middle Fiskville Road with a machete to kill one, who later would go on to choke a stripper in the room of the same hotel where Roxanne was staying a week before. That guy got the fuck off. They never even bothered questioning him. They just believed him that he was deaf when he was able to threaten a woman verbally while he was choking her. This police force was shit for so long. I'm going to be honest, the investigators who worked my case were amazing. But they also weren't there for all this. I'm talking from the 90s to the early 2000s to about 2007. We had one of the worst, I would even say 2010, let's be honest, one of the worst, most corrupt police forces in the country. They were lazy and they did a piss poor job. John Jones was an exception. The new cold case detective on this case who solved it essentially with John, who got shit done. Great dude. Loved his energy in the documentary. But let's not twist shit, okay? We have had a fucked up police force for a long time. We have had a piss poor investigatory situation in that DNA was backlogged so far to the 80s that victims had to sue to say, why aren't you prosecuting or looking into at all my rape and assault? And then they found out their rape kids got lost. They were moldy. Our DNA labs are fucked up Canton style, but worse. And what happened here? The rape victims, the assault victims sued the city, lost, got countersued, and then the rape victims had to pay old Rosemary and crew and the DA after her and the people who fumbled their cases. Imagine having to pay for lawyers' fees for the detectives and the DA who fucked up your rape case and assault case. Literally lost the kids. That's what we're dealing with. So to think for a second that this situation with these boys was not considered an easy way out. Oh, no, no, no. They took an opportunity to pin these kids. And now guess what we're finding out? It was a fucking serial killer. And not just any. One that is very well known for these Missouri cases. And who is unfortunately dead at his own hand. Did not see that one coming. Unbelievable. And that's my fucking rant. It's just so crazy. It's so crazy to me that after this long, we are literally, the rape victims sued because the detectives and the DA, not only did they fuck up their rape kits, they lost some of them. Some got moldy. Some were mislabeled. Okay. Some of them were collected improperly. Some were sent off to a lab and not kept in a cooler. All right. And then these victims never got follow-ups on their cases, follow-ups from crime victims advocates. And they said, hey, what's going on with my case? And they found out, I believe, through a letter, and some of them through a phone call, and some of them didn't even find out at all until they went looking. That, oh, wait, you're not even looking. It's considered closed? Why? Because we fucked up. We lost all this shit. Excuse me. Now I'm going to sue you for that because you egregiously fucked up. And some of these victims were children who got molested and attacked at the time. And it's 20 years later and they're finding the shit out. So naturally they sue. They lose the lawsuit because they have a judge who's buddy with the DA that they are suing, the two DAs, and then get countersued and are forced to pay for everyone who fucked up their cases, attorneys and shit, all their court fees. It's so unbelievable. back to this. Rosemary Lindbergh, the Travis County District Attorney at the time, was intent on retrying Springsteen and Scott because, of course, nothing matches. So let's still blame them. Smart bitch. But before doing so, her office decided to take advantage of what was then a fairly new type of DNA testing called YSTR testing. It was a way of searching for and extracting male DNA only. By the way, she was very lucky with that because a couple of years after that, Governor Rick Perry got pissed at her over some political shit and stripped all the funding from that DNA lab because I believe she was cool with us being a sanctuary city or some shit like that. He didn't agree with something that she voted for her. She said something about him. So he said, cool, I'm going to take a bunch of money from the DNA labs that are supposed to process those rape kits. So we're just going to fuck over all these women who got raped. And then I'm going to tell them that it's your fault, Rosemary. So that happened right after. That was crazy. YSTR testing was ordered on vaginal swabs taken from victims at the time of the murders. By this point, investigators have come to believe that at least one of the victims had been sexually assaulted by that time. Keep in mind, now we know it's much worse. As a result of the YSTR testing, a partial male DNA profile was obtained from one of the girls, but to the surprise of the district attorney's office, the DNA sample did not match any of the format. Yeah, no shit. Still, prosecutors were determined to retry Springsteen and Scott, but before doing so, they wanted to figure out who the mystery DNA belonged to. In 2009, with no matches, the charges against Springsteen and Scott were dropped. After nearly 10 years behind bars, they were released. For years, officials kept trying to track down the source of the mystery DNA, and finally, there was a match this month, according to investigator John Jones. So, also, thank you for saying that, feminine. And I'll tell you what, if I was monetized, they would absolutely censor it and I would get in trouble and I would get a strike and I wouldn't be here anymore because I use adult words. I think it's super demeaning to say shit like rapist. Like, no, we're not going to minimize a sex assault. Saying unalived themselves literally makes me gag in my mouth. Like, we are adults. We're not going to say unalived. Even unhoused trips me out. It's like, let's not minimize their plight either. Okay? Just, you know, we're adult. This isn't a kid channel. You know? I had a friend who used to have a joke about that, about spinal bifida and scoliosis and how, like, doctors cutesy up medical conditions. So when she was pregnant, the doctor always would say, preggers. The comic's name was Faye Hare. I don't know if she does comedy anymore. I don't think so. She said they try to say shit like, oh, you're preggers? Aww. She said you wouldn't do that with anything. At least you wouldn't be like, somebody's got scoliosis. You know? It's just silly. Somebody's got a little mesothelioma, it's their plane. Like, what are we doing? The C word. Just say cancer or cunt or whatever word you're trying to say. It really bothers me. It really bothers me. And I hate it true, because then what? When they get housed, then what? You call them rehomed? Like they're a fucking dog? What's wrong with you? They're homeless. They are lacking a home. We should help them instead of coming up with new phrases to make ourselves feel good about them because seeing them makes us sad. Do something about it. Neuromyelitis optica. That actually sounds like a cool ass superhero. I think that's one of the ones that has done it to itself. Neurolity dighty dighty, you know? It's wild. It's wild to me. Anyway, here's where it gets even more fucked up. So Maurice Pierce gets out, okay? He's running from the cops because we're looping back to earlier. Because what happened? There's nothing wrong with calling someone with scoliosis groovy. They can be groovy too. Oh, do you mean groovy like he has grooves? That's actually hilarious. I love that. You're an auto. There's got to be an autoimmune automotive joke in there somewhere. We'll figure it out. So, Maurice Pierce, right? Remember how earlier I told you everybody agreed, like, these kids need to get the fuck out of town because it's not going to be good for them. Even the lawyer of, I believe it was was it Michael Scott? I believe it was Michael Scott's attorney. I could be a little wrong. It wasn't Forrest. I think it was Michael's. Anyway, no, it was Springsteen. The attorney said everybody needs to get out of town. One of the kids went to go live in West Virginia. One of the others, I believe, stayed in Austin. Another one moved. Why? Because if they stick around, they're going to get harassed. And the attorney even said that he had warned Robert. He's like, if you don't leave town and go to West Virginia and stay with your dad, the police will relentlessly pursue you for small petty shit, and you will likely end up dead at their hands. Guess what happened to Maurice? Maurice Pierce was running from the police, terrified after getting pulled over, and after being tackled, stabbed a cop in the neck. Was it justified? Nope. Nope. However, does it make you go, wow, that's exactly what the lawyer said would happen? Yes, it does make me do that. It's very troubling to me that they chased this man down over, I think it was a traffic violation, maybe like a robbery. It was something like stupid. They tackle him. He stabs him in the neck. Was it justified? No. But he killed a cop. I believe he killed him, or he stabbed him in the neck pretty hard. Pretty bad. It was bad. It was all over the news. He ends up dying. So that happened, and that was predicted. And that's terrifying. Imagine if Damian Eccles stuck around West Memphis, got chased by police, and then ended up killing one and being killed in the process of a takedown. That is what happened. It wasn't hard to see that could have been a possibility here. And that is what happened. Okay. So now I'm going to show you. Is it, Donna? You think so? You know why? Because Big D's at work. Big D's at work. Mookie's is asleep. He's done watching Bluey, so we don't have to have that internet going. And I did fiddle with the cord, start slapping the Wi-Fi thing, and then I blew on it like a Nintendo. So I think that's why. So, also, hello, hidden metadata. Hello to everyone who is in here today. They caught the yogurt shop murderer. Okay. Let's go ahead and look at KView's website because they have a nice rundown of this, of Brashers. And then I'm going to show you some old news reports on him. The guy who ended up coming back through genetic genealogy. First, also, I'm going to show you the girls one more time so that you can see these are the victims, okay? So you've got the two sisters, all right? Got the youngest one right here. And you've got the oldest one, Eliza. Her sister is the therapist in the documentary, okay? These two girls live with their mom. I don't know if you remember that, but they were both living with their mom. Two of the girls didn't work there. They were just there to help clean up and catch a ride home with the sissies. So that was these two. All right. The father of this young lady right here on the bottom left, he breaks my heart, and the brother. They truly thought those boys were responsible because they were duped by investigators, and I'm furious on their behalf. I'm not furious at them for thinking the boys had something to do with it. I can't imagine being yo-yoed back and forth with, well, it was this person. It was this person. We're still not sure. This was a false. I would be fucking furious. I would be so furious. And I'm just so glad that they have definitive scientific DNA proof. Okay. So let's take a look. So first of all, this is the shit bird. I know this is a very silly and maybe general question, but I would like to ask, does anybody else look at this guy right here and go, he looks familiar as fuck? Okay. But here's the thing, to me, he looks familiar for other reasons. I really feel like I have seen sketches of this guy. Like for some reason, he looks like a lot of sketches. A lot of sketch artist sketches. He also looks like, and if he was here for the yogurt shop murders, there is a chance, I don't want to jinx it, but there are 2 other cases in South Texas. I'll say South and Southeast, of young girls around the time of the yogurt shop murders that fit that MO pretty perfectly. And he looks so much like the sketches for those cases. Now, we just found out that I love that name, Mr. Commonface. Okay, Mr. Commonface, especially for the late 80s, early 90s. Let's be real. Look, I get it. Always thought Missouri, every crime he committed, there's definitive proof. He matches a lot of the shit around it. He matches sketches, so much. But this guy, he looks very familiar to like other cases. And no, I would call it a pedo mustache because he's a pedo. But also, I guess you're right. He does kind of look like a guy that is a bit too old for college. But like, here's the thing, you're never too old for college, but like he hangs out at the dorm and it's like, you don't live here. Exactly. Members only jacket. I mean, and he's fucking around over there with, he was in the vicinity of the Springfield 3. He's in the turf of BTK. He's got an Oklahoma record, which is on the way up there. Oh my God, dude, there it is. Maybe that's why. Don't ever say that. No. I had the biggest crush on him in The Outsiders. Oh no. Well, C. Thomas Howell is ruined. Thanks, K-Dubs. Damn it. Anyway, this is that douchebag, okay? Brashers, who died in 1999, was a serial killer whose DNA has been connected to numerous crimes across the U.S., including the 1991 quadruple murder in Austin. Law enforcement sources confirmed to KView on Friday that investigators believe the yogurt shop murders have been solved. Robert Eugene Brashers has been identified as the man who killed 13-year-old Amy Ayers, 15-year-old Sarah Harbison, 17-year-old Eliza Thomas, and 17-year-old Jennifer Harbison at the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt Shop in North Austin, December 6th, 1991. Law enforcement sources say Brashers was identified as a suspect as a result of genetic genealogy technology applied to the DNA profile. But this isn't the first time Brashers' DNA has been tied to a grisly crime. On March 28th, 1998, the bodies of 38-year-old Sherry Scherer and her 12-year-old daughter, Megan Scherer, were found in their home in Portageville, Missouri. Missouri officials said both of the Scherers had been murdered, and Megan Scherer was sexually assaulted. A partial DNA profile was developed from evidence at the crime scene, but the profile didn't have enough markers to be entered into the combined DNA index system, commonly known as CODIS. This issue we talked about in relation to Rex, and we talked about in relation to the yogurt shop murders. Remember, not enough. There's, what is it? 12. Was it? It's got to have 11 or more markers or something like that. In 1999, Brasher died by suicide, but his death was far from the end of his story. In the years followed the Sharon murders, Missouri officials said investigators conducted numerous interviews, followed hundreds of leads. The case was also featured on America's Most Wanted, which is so fucking wild because let me tell you, this was on Roku's live America's Most Wanted as I was going to bed at least 2 weeks ago. And I remember thinking, that's crazy because they solved the Sharon murder. Who was that guy? And then it got me thinking, all right? And I look back and I go, oh yeah, that guy. Who, to have him pop up again, and it's this, holy shit. Then in 2006, significant advances in DNA testing led evidence from the Sharon murders to be resubmitted to the Missouri Highway State Patrol's crime lab. A full suspect DNA profile was developed and entered into CODIS. Yay! That resulted in a match to the April 1990 murder of 28-year-old Genevieve Zatriki in Greenville, South Carolina. Missouri officials said following that match, investigators from South Carolina, Tennessee, and Missouri worked together to investigate more than 1,200 leads, and the cases were again featured on America's Most Wanted. More years passed. In 2017, the investigation yielded a CODIS match to the March 1997 rape of a 14-year-old girl in Memphis, Tennessee. This is a very important time and date, and I will tell you why in a minute. In 2018, investigators contacted a private company called Parabon Nanolabs, aka CC Moore, Queen Mother Bay of IgG. Using genetic genealogy technology, Parabon was able to identify Robert Eugene Brashers as a possible suspect in the case. Investigators obtained DNA samples from Brashers' surviving family members. Missouri officials said traditional forensic tests results indicated Brashers was with very little doubt responsible for the crimes. The same year, Brashers' remains were exhumed in order to confirm the DNA in the profile was his. Additional DNA samples were collected, and lab tests confirmed Brashers' DNA matched the suspected DNA in the case. Now, the suspect DNA. So, back to here. In really the early to late 90s, but let's focus on post 95 or 94, sorry. 94 to 99. There are a significant amount of young ladies in this age range who went missing around Tennessee, who ended up murdered in Tennessee, and who were sexually assaulted in Tennessee. Okay? Not just Memphis, a little north. Those cases had very similar variables that some of these crime scenes shared, but particularly the yogurt shop murders. Now, there's another gentleman who killed people at a seafood restaurant and a couple of other restaurants that he worked in, and was thought to be responsible for these bowling alley murders in Las Cruces, and was definitely thought to be responsible for murders, or known to be responsible for murders and robberies in Houston. And I was very curious about that fella too. We'll call him Paul Reed. I believe I can't remember his first name off the top of my head, but Paul Dennis Reed, I think. So to me, he bore a striking resemblance to some of those Tennessee cases, but looking at this guy now and knowing what we now know, it does make me wonder about some of these other cases. And what's interesting is the ones with these young girls, which we can go over in the future, some of them, there's no body, so there's no DNA, right? But some of them, there were partial profiles. And I do wonder now if Parabon's going to start making some more connections to this bastard. So this is just unbelievable to me. but I believe it because he's been caught. So now I'm going to show you also one of the sketches of him from back then when it came to this other case and what he looked like around the time he passed. So this is Robert E. Brashers. Okay. Do you see the glasses? Do you see the hat? His face is a little differently shaped, but it's an interesting picture. It's a unique hat. And what's wild to me is this sketch looks so different from the other picture we just saw of him, which was also around that time. So I'm thinking that we could see this. It feels like this is the type of guy who can kind of barely change his look, but looks so different. Just wearing a different hat or no glasses, smiling versus frowning completely changes his face, in my opinion. So this is a very interesting character, this guy. Yeah, the nose is a bit wrong. Okay. So here's what I want to do now. I want to tell you a little bit about this fellow. And I'd like to do it by showing you some of his other cases. Some of them are pretty old news reports on him. Okay. This one, honestly, I mean, it's AI as fuck, but it is kind of silly. So we will be skipping that. But here it is. Let me show you some old news reports from other cases. Whoops. That this guy has been named not a suspect, but the doer of. Like, this guy is the perp. He done did it. All right. This case that I'm about to show you is Jenny Tricky's case from 1990. This is a news report from 6 years ago. Because remember, he killed himself in a standoff, but they had his DNA. So they were able to apply it later. All right. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and play this. This is when they discovered that Brashers was also responsible for this Greenville case of Zatricki. Here you go.
Well, Jane and Michael, breakthrough DNA technology and tireless collaboration, closing the final chapter of a decades-long unsolved cold case.
28 years. 28 years. It's almost been time enough to give up hope.
But the
By the way, think about that. This guy, for almost 3 decades on 2 cases, 3 victims, 2 cases, and then another separate case of a molestation of a child. Okay. And then 3 decades for the yogurt shop murders. So that's 2, 3. So now we have 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 7 victims murdered alone. Okay. 1 sex assault on a child and countless other crimes. Some that could be coming forth in the future. What else do we not know about this guy?
Greenville Police Department never did.
We now know that Robert Brashers was a violent serial rapist and murderer.
Robert Brashers from Paragould, Arkansas, the identified killer in multiple cold cases across the United States, including...
Remember, I told you he has a record in Arkansas, Oklahoma. He's got some cases in Florida, ranging from traffic to other things to bad shit. The Carolinas, or as I like to call them, the wet Virginias. Did I say Oklahoma already? I think I did. And Missouri.
One right here in Greenville. It was here at the former Hidden Lakes Apartments where Jenny was found dead in her bathtub. Learning today that it was Brashers who had snuck in and brutally attacked and killed her in the middle of the night. Chief Miller.
And also look at the difference in the MOs. He snuck in, he attacked, he killed in the middle of the night. So he enters a woman's home in the middle of the night. We're presuming she's asleep. He did an Idaho 4, okay, but to one young lady, but she ends up in the bathtub, drenched, I'd imagine, in water. That is wild. Now look at the yogurt shop killings. 4 girls, gunshots, 2 different guns, okay, burned, which is the opposite of put in a bath, right? The crime scene was drenched with water because of the firemen who got there and sprayed out the fire, okay? But this is kind of an opposite MO in some critical signature marks that, or what we thought were signature marks at signatures, if you will, at the yogurt shop murders. I always call them marks. I understand that's not normal, but it's just what I've always called them. I don't know why. So now I'm questioning, you know, and then you have a serial rape, which is also totally different. He seemingly, I mean, he got away with it for a while, but he seemingly was not the brightest crayon in the box. Now, there's some stuff that, look, let me pop up and tell you guys some stuff. There's stuff that we're not going to be able to watch on him because we will absolutely be kicked out. The shit will be ended by YouTube because it's run by fascists. I apologize, YouTube, but really, get your shit together. His family, his daughter, his kids, Brashers, have been on Dr. Phil, okay? And because they were victimized too, all right? Their dad destroyed their lives. He was a horrible person. They've been on Dr. Phil. My dad is a serial killer type of thing. They've gone out of their way to provide DNA evidence from everything I've seen in the past. They are broken from what this man did to their family. Much like Carrie Ralston, broken by what her dad did. Just like Melissa Moore, broken by what her dad did. Just like I'm sure Victoria feels. The families of these serial killers also suffer, and they have been on things like Dr. Phil and quite a few other. There's an ID Network show. There's a whole bunch of shows that they've been on to say our dad is passed now, and we're having to come to grips every couple of years with finding out that he is not the man we thought he was. And that he did horrible things across the country. Almost like in Edward Wayne Edwards, right? That's a lot. And this family's cooperated a lot to try to help solve some of these cases, I believe. That's what it seems like to me. It has been a while since I watched that Dr. Phil, but I was like, eesh, this is sad. They did not know they were all connected. Literally, they did IgG on one, and then they had to do it on another. And they happen to be connected, and then the rape case, and then this. So, the yogurt shop murder. So, this is a situation where we could likely see more connections being made. And they had to confirm by basically really digging his ass up and getting that DNA. You feel me? After getting the DNA results from a relative and doing the IgG tracing. Because you don't just do the IgG tracing. You also have to do the direct match, and it has to. Because for court, right, you have to have a shitload of markers, all the alleles. Everything needs to be rock solid. So even though they connected the hairs to Asa and Victoria, right, they had to go pull from the trash to confirm it. Perfect match to some of them. Same with Rex and the pizza. You know, they had a partial, but now that we put them together, oh, perfect match. So there's that. I'm going to let them continue.
Crediting breakthrough DNA technology from Virginia-based company Parabon Nanolabs and the relentless commitment of the detectives that worked the case that ultimately cracked it.
This police department never gives up.
Identifying Jenny's killer will not bring her back, and her brother says the longing for what could have been still lingers. But it does help close the final chapter on 28 years fully lived.
All whose lives she touched, near and far, then and now, should keep her in their hearts, not as she left, but as she lived.
And Chief Miller saying earlier today that Brashers' victims were not random. He targeted them, mentioning that the man had a driver's license with an address about a mile from Jenny's apartment here in.
So this is interesting too. Think about that. He targeted these victims. Now, what's interesting also to me is he did these crimes. How quick was it before he got out of town? And his next crime wasn't till a bit later. So did he escape immediately post-crime and come straight to Texas, or were there stopovers in between? This could be a situation where, I mean, it is a situation where a better timeline is most definitely needed.
Greenville, asking tonight that anyone with information about this now identified man to come forward. You can read more about Brasher's criminal history on our website, WIFF4.com. Michael.
Okay. So let me pop in here real quick, because I am going to show you a bit more. All right. This is from, nope, we don't want to get copyright struck there. All right. So, the Dr. Phil episode is called Our Father Lived a Double Life. Then there's a true crime detectives episode called Daughter Discovers Her Father is a Serial Killer. Then there's another Dr. Phil. He wants his wife to have closure, talking about the daughter of the serial killer. There's a smaller channel that has Regina and Friends Crime Chat that has a pretty thorough episode where it's titled What the Serial Killer Robert Eugene Brashers Told Me. And it's old, and I would presume it has a lot to do with the Scherer case, I believe. So I will link that later under this. And then there's, again, another Bloodline. There's The Family Torn in Bloodline Detectives about this guy. Connected by Murder, which is an HBO Max show. It is unbelievable how much stuff this guy did and how much material is available for the things that he did. Now, earlier we talked about Maurice Pierce and the situation going on there with the police. And we also talked about the federal law that was utilized to essentially, to be able to get justice and get on this path. But first, I want to show you the Maurice Pierce information, because I told you guys how he passed in 2010. David Smith. Dude, I remember the yogurt shop murders. Those have stuck in my head for all these years. When I was 16 years old when these happened. I lived in Austin, Texas at the time. I went to the school they went to. You went to Lanier. Do you know Sarah? You might know my friend Sarah. Email me. We'll talk. Sarah and her sister were two of the people who testified in the trial against the four boys. They were just asked by the prosecution to provide some background information about them. But I know quite a few people who went to high school with some of these people. My barista's mom is directly related to one of the young ladies. I'm not going to say who. I don't want to dox the barista. And it's really weird how when this documentary came out, so many people were speaking out about their perspective on it on Facebook. And you know how when you scroll through Facebook, you can see what friends of friends are saying and stuff like that. And the amount of people that I just maybe worked with in comedy, one of them I worked with at a coffee shop here a decade ago. The amount of people who have connections to this case is absolutely absurd. Like, everybody had their own story and their own theory, but one thing that kind of prevailed, even the girls who thought, even my friends who thought that one of the guys was a creep, nobody thought the 4 boys did it. Like, literally no one. But what's weird is you go back to when they were accused and everyone thought they did it. When Maurice was killed, a lot of people use that as, hey, he definitely did. Like, they use that as fodder to fuel that. So it was just so bizarre that everybody got kind of sucked into this. It's super personal. It's a local. It's someone they went to school with. It's someone with a vendetta. And it's just like, man, I don't know. This is serial killer behavior. Personally, I always thought it could have been McDuff, especially because of Colleen Reed. But this really did fuck up a lot of people, like their lives. If you can imagine an entire city getting depression, that's the way it's been described to me. I didn't live here at the time. I moved here about a decade later. Actually, shoot, like 15 years later. But even then, when I moved here, it's all you hear about. I lived right behind that shit too. It's all you hear about. And to this day, and that documentary was amazing and it was heartbreaking. When you realize, like, you've seen John Jones around town, that's weird too. Like, hey, I know that guy. How do I know that guy? Like, everyone knows. I mean, a lot of people look at him as a rock star. I'm sure he's not into that. He seems very humble. But the people who went to school with the girls and with the guys who got accused, they on it every year. Like, it really traumatized a generation of this city. I don't know how else to explain it. Again, it's like if you ever drove through West Memphis, which unfortunately I had to once and it was spooky dooky. It was like going through Arkadelphia scary. But you just feel this like heaviness. Like, oh my God, this is where that happened. I feel like that's what it's like here, and it's so sad. And the memorials are really hard to see too at the middle school and then at the yogurt shop. You have friends who knew them. What did you guys think? I later switched over to Leander High School. My parents moved us out of Austin and over to Leander right after this happened because of this. Whoa. Dude, to go from a city school in Austin to Leander is a massive leap. It's kind of what happened to me, though. I went from school in San Antonio, busy city, pop-in, urban, lots of kids, just a dynamic, fast-paced atmosphere, to going to a school out in the country in a farming town. And it was very different. It's kind of a culture shock. I was only there 6 months before I moved. Oh, okay. That's probably why you didn't get a chance to like get to know that shit. That had to be really weird for you, though. Oh, that's like a whole different kind of trauma because it's like these people you just got to know and now everyone's in mourning. There's lots of fast food robberies turned slaughterhouse in the past. Yeah. There was there's the bowling alley. There were these burger murders. There was my cousin was locked into a freezer held at gunpoint by a guy who shot up I want to say it was a Red Lobster in San Antonio, tried to kill people. That was crazy. A lot in Houston. The Wendy's. Oh, there's so many. Wasn't there a KFC where several were? Yep. And then there was the well, the other guy we were talking about, Paul Reed, that fella, I think that was his name, right? Paul Allen Reed, if I remember correctly. His was a couple of different restaurants in Houston. Then he had a fish shop or a fish restaurant or something. It wasn't Long John Silver's. It was like Captain somethings, where he murdered quite a few people. And a lot of his fit this MO. Paul Dennis Reed, I think was his name. How about shit when I turned on the news today and saw it was solved? Dude, me too. I've been freaking out. Like, this is one that now we got to get Roxanne Paltoff. We got to get Roxanne Paltoff. We got to get Rachel Cook. And then San Antonio, Captain D's. Thank you, Zepp. Zepp's on it. It's Captain D's, right? And that shit's tragic too. There's one guy who survived and helped bust all that shit. And that was absolutely crazy, dude. One time I dined and dashed at a Red Lobster. Well, I'm calling Morgan and Morgan on you. Chuck E. Cheese in Aurora, Colorado. The Burger Chef murders, right? That's another one. Where is that at? That was another big one. And then the bowling alley murders in Las Cruces. Good on the family for letting his body get exhumed. Dude, his family, they're victims too. Brown's Chicken and Pasta in Palatine, Illinois. Damn. You know, there are so many of these like robbery murders, but like en masse, tied up, everybody obliterated, like very specifically. There's a trend. But it's weird because there's at least 3 or 4 serial killers. Really, some people would call them like spree killers or mass killers, depending. That all kind of have very similar MMOs, but then 2 or 3 of them just totally different people. It blows my mind. Talk about really weird. After we left and went to Bloomington, Indiana. Oh, shit. I actually know someone who moved from here to Bloomington and had a lot of strong feelings about it. Came right back. Restaurant work is dangerous. Absolutely. Statute of limitations. Megan. They finally caught that guy within maybe the past 10 years. DNA on a napkin in the trash. Oh, really? For Brown's Chicken and Pasta? Interesting. I'm going to have to look. I need to look up who the guy was because I can't recall. I cannot recall. All right, we're going to watch. This is the Maurice Pierce. Oh, yeah. The Lubies in Killeen was insane. And the news footage from that is horrific. Ugh. And then Lane Bryant. Yep. And that was 3 or 4. And they believed for a while that the same guy who was responsible for the Lane Bryant might have been this guy who was responsible for the highway killings. And they also said potentially for some in Houston. There's a whole documentary about it. Kilgore, Texas, 1983. And then the first church mass shooting, I believe, was around that time too, right? Or was that 92? That might have been Killeen or Temple, somewhere up there. Okay. I'm going to read you. I want to show you the Maurice Pierce thing, but honestly, it's just terrible quality. I'll find a better one for next time because there will be a next time. I'm about to deep dive harder on this guy than I ever have. All right. I'm going to pull this up for you as I read to you a little bit more about this nasty son of a bitch who did this horrible shit to our girls. May they rest, bless them. I hope their family can finally move on with these answers. I will say this though, because I do have to go soon, but I do want to tell you some more about this. And it is a celebration. It really is that we're finally getting this information. That again, this is such a, I don't know if I can give it justice with how intense this case. This shit, it made me cry earlier. I had to dip out and play Big Boy on the Roof. Like, okay, like this shit makes me cry like a little bitch. Why? Because it's horrific. And even just being there where the murders happened, when we did that, when I did the drive around to show you some perspective and tell you how horrible Mopac is, even then, I was like, that shit depressed me. I have thick ass skin too. I have psoriasis. But this is something that, I mean, hell, once you've been in Austin for a little bit, you hear the stories, you know someone who knows someone. Everybody has met someone that this case has affected. I have no doubt in my mind, if you have ever lived in Austin since the date that happened, you probably know quite a bit about it. And you absolutely know someone who knows someone who knows them. 10 years in jail because of coerced confessions. Not even a gun matching, nothing. Just that. Just one scared kid saying, I don't know, I didn't do it. Words get twisted. Okay, fine. They were in there they put a gun to his. So I want to give a final thought, and then I'm going to read to you a little more about Brashear. And we'll come back tomorrow and we'll talk more about this case. I'm sure that there's going to be a ton put out about it and about this dude. People are going to be really looking into this guy. And it's one of those things where if anybody suspected this guy who seemingly had never stepped foot in Texas, as far as we knew, if anyone that's Springfield 3 K-dubs. We've talked about that a bit. There was actually, oddly, we talked about that last week because I got into the Ozark scanner page because there's a local nursery there. I think it's called Crawford's. I could be wrong on that name. It started with a C, but there's a nursery there. There were town rumors saying the police were there because 3 bodies had been buried there. Craig Cox, if I remember correctly, might have been the serial killer that they said gave the confession. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's, anybody in the chat want to be a brave soldier and go see if it was Craig Cox? I think it was Robert Craig Cox, if I remember correctly. There were rumors that he had given a tip saying someone else did it and that there were bodies buried behind the nursery and that the nursery is where the 3 girls from Springfield 3 were buried. Really, tombstones. That's wild. And then of course, there were people were lying and saying across the street is where Robert Craig Cox lived. If it's him, is it? Fuck yeah. I remember these fools. But in reality, he actually lived a little bit down. Carson's. There you go. Thank you, Sunflower. Carson's. Crawford's. Because I'm thinking everything. I blame everything on Mike Crawford from the Jerks now. Because he's such an innocent, sweet baby hippie. So, Carson's nursery. That was the rumor, right? So I hop in there, and it turns out everybody in the Scanner Ozarks chat was saying, did you see this on Reddit? Where in Reddit they're saying, did you see this in the Scanner Ozarks chat? And both of them were cross-streaming, saying the other said, this shit's going down. People in town took it so seriously, they drove by to see. They said, I didn't see that. People are like, my cousin works there. The cousin has reported to me that's not happening. Somebody else says, my cousin owns the place and says it is. Thus far, nothing. Yep. Robert Craig Cox. That's his name. And he's the guy who, yeah, I did it. No, I didn't. Yeah, I did it. Psych. Nope. You're never going to get that out of me. So he's a douchebag. He did, Sunflower Soul. He did. And here's the thing. This guy was in the area at the time. Pretty much. I mean, I hate saying it fits the MO because his are kind of all different, but it fits the depravity. It feels, well, we haven't seen the women, so we don't know what was done to them. But it feels very paraphilic the way he behaves comparatively when it comes to other serial killers and rapists, like very extra paraphilic, if you will. Especially because the shit he did to kids. So where was this fool around that time? This kind of opens up a lot of territory for other cases, especially now that the guy got fucking exhumed. Okay. So now they have a full profile of his to compare to partial profiles that they can use YSTR on if it's male. There's so many different things that they can do to compare potential. And right now it doesn't even have to be seminal fluid. Remember John Ramsey, how he was at CrimeCon and he was discussing the case and he learned from Othram directly. He asked them, is there any possible way that you can test different types of DNA without degrading the little bit we have? And they said, absolutely. And he went, well, I'll be damned. Okay, do it. Can we do it? And the Colorado police said, we sent it to a state lab again. So infuriating. But the fact of the matter is, might be able to pull some of those partials, make them fulls, okay? Compare them to the full profile of this fuckstick. Do the CC more on a couple more cases. Probably going to see every couple of years it could come out this douchebag did another one. But I think he should be looked at harder for things like Springfield. And also cases from Arkansas, Florida, Texas, now that we know, Louisiana, definitely. Oklahoma for sure. Definitely both Carolinas, aka West Virginia. Yeah. And definitely Tennessee. That's a pretty big swath of area. They didn't get the teeth right. Well, he doesn't have teeth in that picture. Okay, let me read this to you. But my opinion essentially is two different guns. They got this guy. Do I think that he used two different guns and did this on his own? Possibly, but now I want to know who the fuck he hung out with. Because he could fit the profile of one of the guys. If he was one of those two. If he was just one guy, but two different guns, that's very surprising to me. I still wonder, because remember, they're basing this on a DNA profile, right? From a swab. If there was a second gunman or a partner with this fella that didn't take part in the sexual assault, they still could have taken part in the murder, and that would make sense of the two guns, I think. So I'm very interested. Who did he fuck around with? Who did he hang out with in 1991? Who's your friend, sir? Okay. I'm going to end on this. I'm going to read to you a little bit about what this fucker did in the prior case with the Sharers. Okay? Leading up to his death. Here we go. On March 28th, 1998, 38-year-old Sherry Sharer and 12-year-old Megan Sharer were found dead in their home in Portageville, Missouri. Their bodies were discovered strewn across the living room by Tony Sharer, Sherry's husband and son, Stephen. So husband and son come home. Wife, daughter, sister passed away. Sherry had died of a gunshot to the back of her head. That is consistent with the yogurt shop murders. And was left lying face down. That is consistent with the yogurt shop murders. Bound and gagged. Also consistent. Her daughter Megan had succumbed to a gunshot wound to the head and was also sexually assaulted. Also consistent with the yogurt shop murders. Her hands were bound by an extension cord. Extension cord would have likely been in the house, right? So also using what is on hand at the area where he committed it. So he didn't bring the extension cord with him, likely, right? Same with the yogurt shop murders. What's available on hand? Well, he used their underwear. And Kenneth McDuff also used shoestrings, but in this case, it was the girl's undergarments, right? So using what's available at the scene of the crime to bound your victims. Gunshots to the back of the head specifically, face down, bound, gagged, and an SA. Also essayed the youngest. So that is literally And I should say sexually assaulted. I said essayed, but honestly, it's because it's short and there's a lot of data. So bear with me. Not trying to minimize this, just trying to say a lot in a little time, but I'm such a hypocrite. So this all matches pretty close to the yogurt shop murders. Now, the other case, not so much, but still fascinating, okay? How similar. Her hands were bound by an extension cord. Tony had immediately called 911. Stephen, who was 15 at the time, believed the killer could not have been at their home for more than 30 minutes. Same with the yogurt shop murders. Stephen had called the residence at around 6:20 p.m., but by the time they got back home at 7, he was greeted with the horrific sight of his mother and sister lying dead on their living room floor. During the police investigation that ensued, investigators retrieved a swab of DNA from some residue on Megan's breasts and a hair fiber in her hand. However, there had been no signs of forced entry, no usable fingerprints. There wasn't enough evidence to determine a potential lead. Just a few hours after the Scherer double homicide, a man driving a maroon van pulled into the driveway of a home with a mother and children in Dyersburg, Tennessee. He pulled a gun on them and demanded to be let inside. As she tried to slam the door shut on him, the assailant shot her in the shoulder and she sustained a non-critical injury. Authorities who arrived at the scene and examined the case suspected that he was the culprit behind the Scherer murders, given that his attacks were of a similar nature. After a ballistics test, same ballistics test, that's what connected him to this one. It was found that the weapon used in the Dyersburg murder had been the same as the Scherer murders. The Dyersburg mother was the same as the Scherer murders. Okay. Her memory of the assailant helped create a partial composite sketch, and the police now have the killer's face to work with and look out for. That is the sketch you see on your left. Okay. Forensic experts were able to develop a partial profile for the killer from the evidence that had been retrieved at the Scherer crime scene. However, some key DNA markers were missing. Remember, got to have enough markers, and the authorities were unable to get a substantial lead. Now that we have a completely new way to basically substitute the markers and then compare, basically think of it like synthetically filling them in to get by. All right. It helps a lot. So new horizons with the advent of new technologies for DNA have also led us to be able to cross-reference things like specific markers from blood DNA and other types of DNA, if you will. And this was confirmed at CrimeCon that by Othram. And Parabon, in my opinion, is a little ahead of Othram in that they can take the tiniest speck of information and craft so much knowledge about this person. Kind of like 23andMe, eye color, hair color, likely height. Do they have gout? But with a decent amount, they can take the DNA and they can make an exact computer-generated composite of what this person would look like. You don't need a skull. You don't need bones. You don't need any leads. Yes, phenotyping. Thank you. It's been a long day. Appreciate you. But here's the thing. They did this with a DJ, by the way, in Philly, I believe, who killed a teacher. They can and have put up the pictures of the person who ended up matching next to their computer composite bust of this person, and it matches to a T. It is so incredible. Just want to point that out. The DNA matched with the evidence found at an April 1990 crime scene. So April of 1990. Okay, so about a year and a half later, he's in Austin. April 1990 crime scene in Greenville, South Carolina. 28-year-old Genevieve Zatricki was found dead in her home after she had failed to report to work. She had been beaten, strangled. They used the word strangulated, which, wow. She had been beaten, strangled, and sexually assaulted. Her body had been sprawled out in the bathtub, which was probably in the killer's effort to wash off evidence. That is odd. Eventually, the man identified as the killer was Robert Eugene Brashers, an Arkansas native. The State Highway Patrol also confirmed that Brashers has a long criminal history, including charge of attempted murder, rape, burglary, impersonating an officer. Impersonating an officer is a big one for serial killers. They love doing that shit. And remember, it's the whole authority complex. Ed Kemper wanted to be a fucking cop. JJD was a cop. Ivanovitz, cop. Like, this is all like, let me wave my gun around and have power. And that's really with sadistic, sexual sadists, people with these type of paraphilias. That's about power too. So that's what they're craving. It's sick. They're nasty bastards. They want to be decorated dudes, but they're dumb dicks, okay? However, Brashear had killed himself in 1999 during a police standoff at a motel in Missouri. The gun that he killed himself with in that standoff, as I said earlier, matched the bullets in the bullet casings that were found at the crime scene. It was matched to that gun from the bullet casings at the crime scene in a drain at the yogurt shop where these 4 girls passed away, were murdered. It is so sad that they had to suffer at the hands of this absolute menace and disgusting prick. But I am so glad that these families who have been tortured for so long finally have a real answer with actual evidence to back up what happened to their loved ones, instead of the words of confused teens who have guns to their fucking head. And a drunk DA who's playing political nonsense games, who failed, in addition to 2 other DAs after her, to prosecute hundreds, if not thousands, of rapists, attempted murderers, and murderers in the city because they can't even keep the fridge on at the fucking crime lab, at the DNA lab. It's about time. It's about fucking time. In the fall of 1985, Brashers was arrested in Port St. Lucie, Florida, on charges of assaulting a 24-year-old woman named Michelle Wilkerson. He met her in Fort Pierce and convinced her to accompany him to a bar. This was around November 22nd. After spending their evening there, he took Wilkerson to a dark alley near a citrus grove where, after drinking 6 Budweisers together, he attempted to make sexual advances on her. When she refused and attempted to leave his vehicle, after which a fight ensued between the pair, during which Brashear shot her twice in the neck and head. He sure does have a way about him. Despite the severity of her injuries, Wilkerson remained conscious, managed to leave the car, hid in a culvert under the road. She's a hero and a hoss. Having lost track of her, Brashears went to the beach and threw his gun into the sea. He then attempted to leave, but his truck got stuck in the sand. Haha, fuck you, Brashears, causing him to start walking the streets to search for help. In the meantime, Wilkerson made her way to a nearby apartment building like a queen, like a badass, where she received medical attention. Before she was driven to Longwood Hospital, she described her assailant and his car in detail to police officers. Adrenaline is a hell of a drug. I say that from experience. I didn't even know I was stabbed when I got stabbed, and I saw the knife. I just wouldn't believe it. Looking down, I'm like, oh, I'm bleeding everywhere. Like, you really don't feel shit when you're in shock. You really don't. And you get insane strength. So this woman, imagine like in the head and neck. She's like, let me hide a little bit and then I'll go get help. What a badass, dude. What an absolute badass. Like, wow, dude. And I swear to you, and I don't say that to goof. I say that because when I talk about how you feel nothing, that is, I hope, a comfort to some of you guys, you know? When I bring up to you guys, because I've been accused of minimizing for some reason by some fucking vapid dingoes on the other side of the world, minimizing being stabbed or an assault is not a big deal. It didn't hurt. No. When I'm telling you like you feel nothing, it's to let you know, because it's true. Like you just don't. You get I didn't. I've spoken to a lot of people who also said they didn't. I mean, I'm sure it's different for some people, but the adrenaline really does hide it. And as weird as it sounds, I kind of say it as a comfort because, again, it's true. It's my experience. It's also a lot of other people's who have been physically assaulted, stabbed, beaten, even shot. And I will say this, I think it's important to say that. I don't think it's impressive or anything like that. It's because with the amount of people whose family members or loved ones have been murdered in that way and other ways, I do, and call me weird, I don't care. I feel like it's a strange comfort. I just want them to know that their loved ones more than likely didn't die in the traditional sense of pain. Does that make sense? Like if you've ever gone, oh my God, this person I loved was attacked. They were stabbed to death. And you're thinking, oh no, I just hope they didn't feel pain, or I can't imagine how scared they were. Just know that you absolutely go into shock and you don't feel that pain. And I don't talk about this often, but I've mentioned it to a few people. Things happen in your brain when you think you're dying. Even when you're unconscious and subconsciously, I guess you're kind of coming to terms with it. Some people call it seeing the light or near-death experience. For me, it was super weird. We'll talk about it on another day, but it was weird. It was just something I can't explain that is fascinating. I've heard other people say similar things happen to them, similar thoughts, but the way it's presented is just kind of shocking, and it happens so quick, but also takes a long time, if that makes sense. I didn't realize that I was not knocked out as long as I was on the ground because it felt like a millennia, like a lifetime of seeing specific things that in a way brought me a lot of comfort. And then you wake up and you're like, oh, it's sticky, it's hot, I'm covered in blood. Oh, these people tried to kill me. Like, that's kind of weird. That's a little awkward because seconds before that, you just feel a peace, even if it's not your time. So I like to think that if it is, at least it's peaceful and nice subconsciously, but also at least it's not traditional pain. And by that, I mean like bad, real pain that you can feel. And I think that people should know that so that if you do think it's all pain and suffering in the end, even if it's not natural, C. Smith, even if it's at the hand of some menace or some psycho, you need to know that your own body does protect you. It really does. I met quite a few people who, their kids passed away in tragic ways, were murdered. And, I think about Celeste too. Like, I just hope her family knows that, like, I mean, if you are alive when that stuff is happening, or if you are experiencing that, like, your body really does protect you. Like, adrenaline is super real. It's the most real shit. I mean, it literally, it does something. It does something in your brain that changes kind of everything. You know, it really, it in an instant, you're Mario. You know, when Mario, this is how I explain it on stage. You know, when Mario touches the star and he's blinking, blinking, and he's just destroying, fucking all this shit up, right? That's what adrenaline feels like. It's like, yeah, I'm tiny. Yeah, I'm a little bitty Mario. Yeah, I'm fucking blinking right now, but listen to me. I'm a menace and I'll fuck you up. That's kind of what it feels like. That's why when this young lady, I think, when she got shot in the fucking neck and head, people might go, oh my God, how did she hide under for so long? How did she carry herself that way? How did a girl murdered in a field by her wrestling instructor survive for a full day and get help? That girl, Crystal. How about that girl in 1991 or 2 in Dickinson, Texas, whose throat was slit all? She was 8 years old, left in a field for, I think it was over 48 hours in the hot sun, and she survived. She not only survived, she remembered his name. She wrote it down. I think it was Dennis. She knew what brand of cigarettes. What about Bobby Joe Long? What about the girl who, didn't she become a sheriff eventually, Lisa? She was the only person who could ID this motherfucker because she knew the interior of his car. And he just tried to murder her after her own family tried to, because remember, her stepdad at home was sexually molesting her. She told the serial killer, she's like, fuck it, just take me. Like, Jesus, my life is horrible. And like, literally, she's riding her bike. This happened. She's like, well, of course. And she's thinking, well, you know, at least it's not as bad as home. And then she felt this overwhelming, I have to live. I need to live. Fuck this. I'm not going to let him win. I'm not going to let my family win. And she survived. But she was brutally attacked. And how did these women do that? How did they survive? How did they escape? How do men do it? How does anybody who's injured in a way that feels life altering or is, how do they get the strength? It's all fucking adrenaline, dude. So I think this case in Fort Pierce with this young lady is just, she was able to describe her assailant in his car to police officers hours later, right? After being shot 3 times in the head and neck. It's unbelievable. But it happens. Exactly, Kevin. Adrenaline. You do get an overwhelming sense of peace. Absolutely. And it's wild. I'm not going to say it's just like taking DMT, but it's very close. Allegedly. As someone who worked at a Joe's Crab Shack and a Starbucks and consensually chose to do whippets because I was a degenerate, I can assure you they are nothing alike. Whippets feel like your brain is farting backwards and you just left the dentist. This is something, I'm not gonna lie, it really is it's like DMT times 1,000. It's like ayahuasca times 100. I don't know. I'm not gonna condone it, but I will say it's fucking awesome. That's it. It's never killed anyone, that's for sure. Okay, so don't do drugs. Anyway, a few minutes later, Brashers was apprehended while wandering the beach and charged with attempted first-degree murder, aggravated battery, and using a firearm during the commission of a crime. He was convicted the following year and sentenced to 12 years imprisonment, but was granted parole May 4th of 1989. Who does that sound like? A serial killer that was granted parole. Sounds like Kenneth fucking McDuff. That makes me so mad. Why are they... Stop letting them out. Once you killed 1 person, just keep them in. 2, definitely keep them in. Rapes, attempted murder, and kill. Like, what are we doing here? After his release, Brashers moved to the states of South Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia. Georgia? Oh, yeah, we knew that. often changing his place of residence. On February 18th, 1992, he was arrested in Cobb County, Georgia for grand theft auto, unlawful possession of a weapon, and theft. While searching his vehicle and apartment, policemen found a radio scanner. There's a case in Florida we will talk about. There's a few cases with that. There's a case in Florida involving a judge getting off a pedophile who had his brother's work scanner in his car to use to do the photography Alcala Joe Naso lore to his home. And that guy's a wrestler who works at the same dojo as Chase and Rance, who is a convicted pedophile. And that guy's a convicted pedophile too. And they both trained a young lady who later went missing. We're going to talk about that case another day. Did the exact same fucking thing. Holy shit. He had a radio scanner, a police radio scanner, a police jacket, lockpicking tools, and a fake Tennessee driver's license. Fearing another prison sentence, he made a plea deal with the prosecutors and pleaded guilty to the most serious of the charges, allowing for the rest to be dropped. As a result, he was sentenced to an additional 5 years imprisonment, which he served in full and was released February of 1997. So February of 1992, so 2 months after the yogurt shop murders, this fool's in Cobb County, Georgia. Interesting. Could go on the timeline. Darlene, never have truer words been spoken other than when Kev from South Boston said he'd like to try DMT. Does sound like a Jimmy Burke thing. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I agree with you also, Agent Pat Sanford. I brought your comment up because it's true. I wonder if this is about oxygen not getting to the brain. Yeah, it could be. I mean, something's going on chemically. Something's going on chemically. It's fascinating. On January 13th, 1999, police officers noticed that a stolen vehicle had been parked in the parking lot of a Super 8 motel in Kennett, Missouri. After speaking with motel personnel, it was established that Brashers and his family had arrived in that vehicle just days earlier. Officers then broke down the door and found him hiding under a bed with a loaded gun. But when they attempted to arrest him, he started resisting and opened fire. The officers were forced to retreat and called for backup. Within a few minutes, the motel grounds were surrounded with police cars while Brashers took his wife, daughter, and 2 stepdaughters hostage. Oh, yeah. He took his family hostage. When I tell you they were tortured by this man, he took his family hostage. Rude. After 4 hours of negotiation, 4 hours. Don't worry. We'll talk about farting backwards another time. It's intense. It's a lot. It's like a double pipe classic reversed. Within a few minutes, the motel grounds were surrounded with police cars while Brashers took his wife, daughter, and 2 stepdaughters hostage. I don't like how they differentiate between the stepdaughters and the daughter. They're all it doesn't matter. He's a serial killer. Fuck it. After 4 hours of negotiations, he released the 4 hostages, his family, and attempted to shoot himself in the head. Failure. He remained alive for 6 more days, but succumbed to complications from his injuries on January 19th. His death was later ruled a suicide. That's because it was. Brashers' name remained in obscurity until 2018, when genealogy expert C.C. Moore from Parabon Nanolabs was able to identify Brashers through investigative genetic genealogy as a suspect in 3 murders and several rapes dating back to 1990. In response, prosecutors from New Madrid County and Pemiscot County, Missouri, never heard of that, filed a motion to exhume his remains and conducted additional testing. Bless you, Cece. On September 28th, 2018, the casket containing Brashers' remains was exhumed from the cemetery in Paragould, Arkansas, and DNA was extracted from the bones. We got bone DNA. This is good. It revealed his genetic profile was a perfect match for the murderer of 28-year-old Jenny Zatricki, who had been bludgeoned, raped, strangled with pantyhose. The pantyhose and the molestation similar to yogurt shop. Bludgeoned, not so much. At her apartment, location different, in Greenville, South Carolina. Now, here's what I'm wondering now. Now that I think about it, here's what I'm wondering. Bethel and Vincent. I wonder if they're listening. We're going to have to talk to them about this. This is interesting. I understand there were multiple stabbings with her, but this is a paraphilia-loving motherfucker who changes his shit up. So it's possible, and that's the area, and that's around the time. It's what, 3 years before? And he did stick around for a while. Holy shit. At the time, it had been established that after murdering her in her bedroom, the killer dragged her body into a bathtub and submerged it before writing, this is the fucked up part, before writing, "Don't fuck with my family" on the bathroom's mirror. So Genevieve was murdered, bludgeoned, raped, strangled, tossed in a bathtub, and then the killer wrote, "Don't fuck with my family." He had preemptively stalked her, right? Brashers was living in Greenville at the time, and subsequently after that, until 1995. I believe Beth Ellen's case happened in 93, right? We're going to have to think about this. Don't fuck with my family. I don't think it's because she fucked with his family. That could be him trying to point police somewhere else. Makes me think he was very concerned with getting caught. Also, hence the submerging of the body. So he was in panic mode. Yet he still went on months later to come to Austin for some reason, commit a murder, and then go back. Okay. Oddly enough, there was quite a bit of construction going on around that time. And I can't recall what, but it was mentioned in a podcast. And now I'd like to go back and see. I wonder if we can link him to any work projects for his construction job. It's very interesting. Fuck. Yeah, the Beth Ellen thing really trips me out too, because it seems as though he does use multiple methods. Interesting. DNA also linked him to the double murder of the Sharers, Sherry and 12-year-old daughter Megan, both of whom were shot to death in their home in Portageville, Missouri. Both victims had been tied up. Megan had been raped before Brashers shot and killed both of them. Approximately 2 hours later, he broke into another home in Dryersburg. We already talked about that. He attempted to assault the 25-year-old woman. The victim fiercely resisted, causing her assailant to flee the crime scene. There was no useful biological evidence left behind, but forensic ballistics were able to prove the same gun had been used in this attack as the murder of the Sharers. The last crime he was linked to was March 11th, 1997, for the rape of a 14-year-old girl in Memphis, Tennessee. Until now, as he has been identified as the yogurt shop murder perpetrator. See, that's the thing, though. He worked in a concrete pouring business, which is quite a bit different. Oddly, in the Patty Vaughan case out of Lavernia, Texas, let's just say I dated a guy in high school who lived next door to that family in J.R. Vaughn. The papa, him and his sister mopped up the blood in the house in the morning after she went missing. What's interesting is they also said the same thing about her. Her bones could be in concrete at the new school being built, I believe in Pleasanton or Jordanton. Same situation as Springfield 3. So JR, the husband, who they were going through a divorce, jealousy, it was Christmas, decides on Christmas he has to work. He has to go pour concrete at this local high school. Not Lavernia, but another county over, down if you were going towards like Pleasanton or Uvalde. So he goes and this is in Lavernia. So he goes and he's a concrete pourer. And here's the thing, he made a fuckload of money. a lot of concrete pourers make a fuckload of money. Hence this guy going around the country, apparently having the time, having the energy, having the money. I could absolutely see him having a pretty good life pouring concrete. But a lot of these dudes back then, especially the 90s up to the mid 2000s, they were their own bosses. They owned their own concrete pouring company. They got to pick their own hours. It just occurred to me that JR used to brag about that. He used to say, I can pick my own hours. I pour concrete. So we picked, I believe it was a Saturday in Christmas of all days. Hello, Pickle. Truth seeker. 3 of those girls were connected to our family with the yogurt shop murders or with the other victims that we're talking about with Brashear. Jennifer and Sarah were our neighbors. I am so sorry. It really hits. What did I just tell you guys? If you live in Austin or lived in Austin at any point in time, you know someone who's close to this case, or you know someone who knows someone. Truth seeker, let me ask you a question. Does it feel like almost like this indescribable depression of, doesn't it really feels like a weighted blanket, but in a bad way? Like thinking about these families having to go through another round of disappointment over and over again. And then to think, again, this is like our West Memphis, isn't it? Like these kids got accused falsely. It ruined their lives. But at the same time, these families were fucked with. Imagine having to mourn your children. Such a horrific thing. To be told we got them. And then we only got half of them. And then whoops, it's not them. I mean, that's so much. And now it turns out, despite all the accusations, all of the Hector Polanco is a son of a bitch. That man put them through. I mean, think about it. That man put them through so much. This cop who just wanted another notch on his belt. And then to find out the family, the actual killer's family also went through, and then all these past victims. It is so much damage. Exactly. Evil does so much damage. It's like in tentacles. And it's roots of a tree, but they're growing. The more the roots grow and expand, the worse it gets. It's always, everyone it touches, it depresses. It really ruins everyone's sense of okay and safety. And when it's been 30 years to see family members pass, friends pass, I'm going to say this though. Here's the comfort that we can take. This is not something that is easy to look on the bright side of because it's disgusting. And yeah, it makes me, it's something about, I don't know how to explain. I'm trying to put into words. It's just a weird feeling when you've been here long enough. And again, my barista is like, I knew them. This is my friend testified in this shit. Also, the guilt, if you were someone who accused the boys, but the guilt, if you were someone who didn't, but you wanted the families to get answers. And then the family being toyed with, being fucked with, let's be honest, by investigators, not Jones. He was incredible. And the new one, incredible. But everyone in between, Hector and all them, like, here's the small comfort. A lot of these family members of these girls, survivor's guilt. Thank you, Darlene. I didn't know how to put it. You got it. You get it. These family members who are alive, I'm glad that they're still here to at least have the comfort of knowing they now have answers. And if there is any chance to mend relationships, or for the accused and the families to somehow come together for healing, literally for everybody, they needed this. They needed this so bad. They needed the science behind it. They needed to be sure. Because I don't know. I don't have a kid or anything, but I feel like the feeling will probably never, ever leave you if you lose a kid, right? Or a family member that you really love dearly, a parent. That feeling of like not being able to sleep or to rest at night probably sticks with you for a long fucking time. This unease. Sometimes you just want to know. And the whole closure thing feels like kind of outdated, right? It feels like not, it's just such a minimizing word for what it really is, because you don't really actually get closure, but it's just knowing. Even if the answer sucks, just knowing gives some sort of odd comfort. And I just hope that the families can sleep again. As their neighbor, as someone who probably saw them, probably interacted with them, and you're probably going through a lot too. I hope that you can get some rest knowing that, like, there's at least answers for this family and they don't have to question anymore. You know, did the right guys, or the guys who did it, did they get away? There's got to be at least a little comfort in knowing the son of a bitch is dead too. And I'm glad he's dead. It sucks he got to do it by his own hand. Obviously, he was a big fucking coward about it. But let's be real. If the parole board let him out once already, can't risk that again. So at least he's fucking dead. And for those of you who missed it, we are talking about Robert Eugene Brashers. Okay? And he did a lot. He was killed, or he was chased down. He killed himself at a Super 8 motel in Kennett, Missouri, after holding his own family hostage. Ugh. So here's the thing about his daughter, okay? Because his daughter gave an interview. And for those of you who, if you haven't seen him yet, I'll put up a sketch of him. The thing is, the Tennessee case in 97, okay, and other cases that he was involved in, or is thought to be involved in, that sketch versus what he actually looks like, that this sketch was circulated until what, 2018? So it's really only, I mean, think about it, a year before COVID. That's when they identified exactly who this guy was. The guy who's actually responsible for these murders, for the sharers, and for Yogurt Shop recently. So this actual picture of what he really looked like on the right that you're about to see, that picture has not been in the zeitgeist of potential, let's just say, serial killers, if you will, set for maybe what, 5, 6, 7 years. Okay. So I do think, especially with CeCe Moore in the exhumation, getting that profile, we could see more. And this could be very helpful to quite a few other cases, especially those with partial profiling. All right. I'm going to show you his picture one more time. This is the son of a bitch who did it. Nasty bastard. Pardon my language. I'm fired up and I'm pissed. Okay. So the daughter's interview, and then we're going to wrap it up. In February of 2019, Brashers' 27-year-old daughter, Deborah, was interviewed by reporters to recount some details of her father's biography. So as you can see, the family is cooperating. They're giving a timeline. They did give their DNA. She said that she first saw her father in early 1997 after he had just been released from prison. Because remember, he went to prison. Was it 91? Just like literally 2 months after the yogurt shop. All right, after he'd just been released. According to her, for the next 2 years, he lived with her, her mothers, and her half-sisters. During this time, she claimed that he was sometimes aggressive towards them, once fought her stepfather and caused him a head injury with a drill, and perhaps most disturbingly, he had made a tape recording of himself making small cuts on his neck and arm with a saw to see if he could withstand the pain. Deborah was inclined to believe that her mother, Dorothy, who died December of 2018 at the age of 53, which is very young, knew about her father's past activities, telling them to call him by a different name and to keep him inside of the house. In addition, she claimed that his mental health sharply deteriorated circa April 98, and that his job at a construction firm led him to be absent from the house for weeks at a time. During these periods, it's possible he may have committed additional rapes and murders, but as of October 2024, no other crimes have been linked to him until today. Until today. Now, I will correct something. I believe he did actually pour concrete, but I guess you could say construction. Fair enough. So, this is a guy who pretended to be a cop, radio scanners, police jackets, lock-picking tools, fake Tennessee driver's license, operated in multiple states, used a couple of different methods, preferred the gun to the head. This is concerning. Preferred bounding and ligature, although did not primarily stick to it. He would do it at work. He would do it at home. He would stalk some victims, potentially others, maybe not so much. We're going to be looking into this a lot over the next few days until the press conference. But I have to say, this really does feel like, it does feel like when we found out who Golden State was. It's that important. It is. All murders are important. All crimes and all the victims are important. I think maybe because it's literally close to it is home, but also I just don't know how to explain the feeling of this. It's very overwhelming. It's also overwhelming to know that the families are finally getting a real answer, not a confession from scared teens, not some bullshit from some half-ass investigators who threaten people into confessions and don't give a fuck about the truth. And again, not talking about Jones or the new guy, they rule. But it also feels good to really think that Jones is finally going to get to wear that yellow shirt. All right. Good night, you guys.